Class is in session.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Unlearn 16. Class is in session. Am I going to leave that in? Yes, I am. Listen, teaching gym is a situation, and it's a strain on my throat. I'll try to keep it clear. Welcome. It's just going to be me today, guys. You just get stuck with me today. Listen, today we're going to dive into... Oh, heaven help me. We're going to dive into some education. Now, I know for a lot of people who are listening, or my American friends or friends from all over the world, a lot of the times I really do take shots at the United States. Guys, yeah, stop making it so easy, really. And just pull it together. I would love to not, right? But don't think for a second that we don't have problems here. Okay, don't think for a second that the educational system and the healthcare system aren't on this tipping sort of balance, the cliff of insanity, very Princess Bride reference for all of you out there, if you will. Going from one of the top countries in the world for education and for healthcare, and we're about to be pushed off of this cliff. And why are we going to get pushed off? Well, the same reason everybody gets pushed off: money. It's about money. And recently, Doug Ford, who is Ontario's provincial premier, for those Americans listening, it's kind of like your governor. So, do I say like DeSantis? Maybe not like DeSantis, but a really, really close cousin. Let's put it that way. I don't know if Ford would go up against Mickey Mouse. I don't think he's even that stupid. But nonetheless, our Doug Ford has come up with this plan, I'm assuming. He didn't come up with it. Listen, a team of idiots came up with it. And then they siphoned it through our education minister, Stephen Lecce. Stephen Lecce got up and announced this new piece of legislation that's going to be tabled. And the name of the legislation, are you ready for it? Hold the applause to the end, please, because it's an incredible, sort of inspiring, thought-provoking, forward-thinking kind of title. Here we go. Better Schools and Student Outcomes. That's the name of the bill. It's like the blind must be leading the blind up there. I would love to be in one of those rooms just once in a blue moon and say, is that it? Is that what we're going with? We're going with that? Yeah, no? Nobody has any other ideas? No? Okay. But to be honest, the title of this bill is very reflective to the vapidity of it that none of us have really seen. So, could I be eating my words by the time I see it all carefully constructed and crafted into beautiful and powerful, impactful even, words and plans of action to take place in schools? I could be wrong. I would love to be wrong. Guys, I would love nothing more than in 2 months Joanna going, you know what? You really, really took a shot where you shouldn't have. They've really pulled through. And this whole thing, and this education bill, no matter how ridiculously titled, it really did better our schools and outcomes. But guys, listen, I'm going all in on the other side. I'll put my house, I'll put my rep, I'll put everything on the other side of that equation. And it's going to do what Doug Ford and Stephen Lecce have done best, which is create the illusion of change, create the pretense of accountability while jockeying for position in the background and figuring out ways to siphon money from the system in order to do whatever the hell else Doug Ford wants to do, including eventually, let's be also perfectly honest, privatize both healthcare and education. That's his goal. But look, I'm gonna go through some of the main, this is the main headlines that they put out to the newspapers. And I read all of the newspaper sort of interviews, and I listened to, and these are the specifics that I dwindled it down to. This is what they chose to put out, guys. So when you come at me and say, Joanna, you're being too hard on them, this is their words. We have 4 things to go through today. We're going to go through one by one. I'm also going to put I'm going to put an invite onto this platform. Stephen Lecce. Anytime you would like to have a conversation on this podcast, I know I'm nobody, Steve, But let's be honest, neither are you. Um, I think it's time you sat down in a room with an educator. You don't need to be me, but with an educator who's been in the system, who understands the curriculum, who understands government, who understands policy, and you sit down and you have a televised discussion slash debate to root through these issues. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for all of our politicians. But right now, I'm putting that offer out to Mr. Lecce. I would love to. I'll come where you are, hon. Anytime, anytime. All right, let's go through your list, sir. Whew. Number 1, focus on reading, writing, and math. I'm curious, Steve, what do you think we're focused on? What? And by the by, this is kind of one of those statements that makes it sound as though you are hanging out with DeSantis maybe a little too much, or just, copying from his playbook, right? It makes it sound like these skills that we've obviously, chucked out the window in favor of coloring, are completely overlooked. We're ignoring them. We haven't been focusing on them. All of this effort that teachers are doing has gone to nothing remotely resembling reading, writing, and you say math, but you really want to just say arithmetic because it's the same expression that was used since 1942. Couple things. Number 1, we are. The presumption that especially in our elementary schools, we are not focused on these core learning strategies is perhaps the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Number 1. Number 2, you're boiling education down to the creation of automatons. We no longer live in a world where these basic sort of building blocks are enough. We live in a world where kids can get access to anything at any time with the click of a button. We cannot live in this kind of atmosphere. We cannot teach in this kind of atmosphere while setting the bar to this level. We can't. That's number 1. Number 2. How many kids are in each class, Steve? When you increase the amount of students in a grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, and you increase that ratio, how do you expect teachers to be able to have the time and the ability to spend with individual students? And when those students come with many different learning exceptionalities, how do you expect them to fixate and be able to help those kids who are further behind than some and still push the ones in order to make them excel? How is that supposed to happen? While we're in this category, what's your test for this? Because while every other institution in the world is starting to recognize the inefficiencies, the lack of credibility of standardized testing, while Harvard University itself is chucking out the SATs, you're what? Going to go back to more standardized testing as somehow a level of clarity on what they've learned? Are you okay? Are you going to bother to listen to any sort of educational expert along the way? Or are you going to simply sit in an echo chamber that's trying to figure out the best way for you to save money? As for math, I have a question for you. Why not create specialty teachers that are math experts, that are math teachers, where their sole job is to focus on a skill that is difficult, that, in learning it, it requires you to see the world differently. And the more ways we can view math and configure math, the better off each student will be. We need math experts. Are you going to hire them? Are you going to pay them what they're worth? Because I'm telling you right now, if I were to go back to teach grade 4, I'd be qualified to teach math via your academic standard. What a joke. What a joke. You haven't created you want some real change? Create a system in which elementary school teachers who are amazing and fantastic, and by the way, are balancing not only learning, but foundational socialization skills that will last a lifetime. And you're shoving 25, 30 kids in the room with a whole bunch of learning exceptionalities. And then when they don't do well at math, you're blaming who, Steve? Who are we blaming here? You're not blaming you. Who are you blaming? Right? Why not have more education go into elementary so that they can streamline their expertise, that they can figure out ways to build that foundational knowledge? So when a kid is taking math in grade 5, 6, 7, and 8, they have a strong foundation rather than be consistently pushed through, because guess what? It saves money. So that's number one. And by the way, how do you force reading, Steve? And this is a genuine question. I have kids that will do anything to avoid it. They'll sit and stare at the page for God knows how long in order just to pretend to flip it to avoid doing the reading. Do you understand that problem? Do you understand why it is? Have you hired child psychologists and developmental experts in order to understand the cultural shift that we have undergone that has really taken that away from our kids in a significant way? You think that's going to cost us less money to fix? Less money to get at? You think the same old reading, writing, and arithmetic, you think that methodology that worked 50 years ago is going to work today? Are you? I get so irate because of and everybody within that government's lack of foresight and lack of understanding of what we now sit in. Because your second point is accountability that drives better student outcomes. What does that mean? First of all, nobody knows what it means. You want to know why you use the word? Use word like accountability. And when people hear accountability, they think blame. So they think, cool, we're going to have standardized tests and we're going to have standardized test scores. And somehow that's going to be indicative of if my kid is doing well and if the teacher is doing their job, right? Is this it? This one test? So what are you setting up then? You're setting up for the teacher to teach to the test. What a nightmare. Hasn't worked any single place ever. What a disaster. And you're setting the sights to blame who? To blame who, Steve? How are you going to blame a teacher for poor, let's say, reading skills within their classroom when, let me give you a couple of examples. You could have kids with dyslexia. You could have kids on the spectrum. You could have new students coming from all over the world that come to our schools, and we try to find space and ways to involve them and inspire them and make them feel a part of the community. How are you supposed to have a standard reading level when you have all of that exceptionality in it? I would love to know your answer. I'm pretty sure you don't have one. I'm pretty sure what you want is the teacher to teach the test, the kids to do well on the test, the kid to then graduate the grade and move on to something else. But to hell with what? To hell with education, to hell with learning how to think critically, to hell with understanding possibly what the natural progression is of an individual student's learning path. You're creating the illusion, the pretense of some sort of significant change and accountability with these ridiculous standardized tests. It's embarrassing. And I understand only 17% of the population voted for you, but if I were that 17%, my head would be hung so far down, I wouldn't even know what to do with myself. What's a better student outcome? How are you balancing better student outcomes with all of the sociological, and economic issues that go into that school. I'm going to give you another example, Steve, because you're not all about examples, but maybe if I give you a few, you can understand what it is. So when you're trying to solve problems and you're trying to bullcrap your way through, you stop using taglines like accountability and you start actually coming up with something. There used to be a school called Sir Robert Borden. Sir Robert Borden was a vocational technical school. So kids went there and it was just amazing. The school was fantastic. It had a whole wing for um, uh, like auto mechanics, a whole wing for electrical and carpentry, a whole wing for cooking and chef school and things like that, a whole wing for like hairdressing and makeup and all. It was amazing. It was really, truly amazing. The problem with Sir Robert Borden, it was in a particular area that suffered from relatively significant economic disparities. So these kids coming to these schools didn't have money. It also suffered from a lot of internal and external gang problems within that area. So they had to put a lot of money into making sure it was safe and making sure the kids were safe when they were there and who was coming in and out of the school. And I'll give you an example because this is, people love to talk about equality and equity. This is a great example of this. When you fund schools, you say that you fund them equally based on student. But let me give you an example of why that doesn't work. And it's never worked and it will never work. You just don't have the moral fortitude to say what needs to be said. So you know what, Steve? I'm going to say it for you. Sir Robert Borden would spend a significant portion of their budget, not on books, not on new computers, not on things for the students, not on new, different resources and things like that, technological necessities. They would spend the majority of their money on making sure the kids had bus tokens to get to and from school every single day. And I'm telling you, the attendance rate at that school was through the roof. And these kids all had problems, every single one of them. They were coming from homes, I did a workshop, they were coming from homes that were broken and hard. And they were coming, some of them had already had involvements with the law. There was a few girls that had obviously expressed the reality that they were at that point pregnant, but still wanting to graduate school. There were people there that had to have full-time jobs so their family could still stay in the house they were in while they were trying to graduate high school, and they didn't have money for anything else. And then you have a school like Forest Hill. Same money per kid. Then what happens? Then a family donates a library. They can spend their money on building new gyms, on team uniforms, on technology, on new computer labs. Do you see the failure of equity of equality in that capacity? You want to start talking about education? You need to start looking at the individual, at what that school does, how it does it, and what are all the different problems it's facing. Because just handing out money per kid, per capita, you can do it. And you can sit back and say, well, I gave every kid the same chance. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Because you have absolutely no idea of where they've started. You didn't give them the same chance. You gave them the same money, but different starting blocks. You want to change the future? That's where you start. You want an inspiring speech, Steve? Start talking about flooding our schools, our public schools, with money. Start there. Start there. You want to change future issues of jobs, of addiction rates, of mental health crisis, of transferable skills, of lessening criminal activity. You don't start by letting Forest Hill donate a library and not giving enough money to the kids at Sir Robert Borden to get to and from school. By the way, that school's closed. Of course it has. Of course it has. Because you don't want to fund it. And I'm not saying this is just the Conservative government, by the by. I'm saying you're doing a particularly poor job of it right now. Building schools faster. How about you fix the ones that you already have? But this idea of building schools faster, to me, kind of, and I don't know a lot about it, so I'm not going to go on for this one for too long, but to me, it resonates in that kind of the same space where it's like, I'm going to expand housing. And then Ford makes a call to his friends who are builders and said, "Psst, go buy some of the green belt, because as of tomorrow, it's going to go on the market. I'm going to change the zoning so you can build whatever you want." This smells of that. It really does. This smells of that. New school construction with a private connection. That's what this smells of. Now, I haven't seen the demographics of students, but I do know most students or most schools, those numbers are getting smaller. So are we tearing down old schools? What are we doing there, Steve? I would really like an explanation on that one. I'm not going to go too far down that road because, do we need schools? Absolutely. But I'll tell you what we need way more than the building. We need the staff. We need the infrastructure. We need the support staff. You just spent God knows how long denying some of the lowest paid educational workers a fair and justifiable wage increase. You instituted the notwithstanding clause. You pathetic, embarrassing little men, to force them back to work. And you want, hold on, let me read it again. Better schools and student outcomes. I think these two things might be counterintuitive, Steve. I don't know. I mean, check with your psychic or something, whoever it is gives you information. And then the last one on this list, and heaven help me. Empowering parents. Again, did you call DeSantis on this one? What does that mean? Nobody knows what that means. Now, I read a little bit, and it's about disciplinary action with their kids. It didn't really define it in any way, shape, or form. Let me talk about parent involvement. Number one, parents should be absolutely 100% involved in their child's education. They should know every assignment, every report card, every test that's coming up. They should know what their kids are taking, how they're doing. They should have constant contact with their teachers. They already do. They already can. They already can see the curriculum. Everything is online. Everything is available consistently. If you want to email a teacher, you email a teacher, and guess what? Their job is to get back, and that happens across the board. So, what are we really talking about here, Steve? Are we talking, heaven help me, about parents controlling curriculum? Because I think you are. Again, I think you've been sitting, a little too close to that southern border. And by southern, I do mean Florida, not just the United States. Because if you're talking about parents being allowed to influence curriculum because of whatever ideas they deem appropriate, then we have a problem, my dude. Then we have a significant problem. And how dare you be so incredibly weak as to kowtow to that kind of line of thinking? Let me give you an example. And I know, example, I know you don't really know what it means, but let me give you an example. So Kathleen Wynne was under the Liberals, and everybody knows I had my podcast with Kathleen Wynne. We talked very seriously about a lot of different things. There were things I agree with her and things that I didn't. Education was one of them that I could agree on parts and disagree on others. But one of the things I agreed on was her change of the sex ed curriculum. And when she was in office, she altered the sex education curriculum, which, by the way, hadn't been, like, the last time it was changed was 1998. And she changed it to be age specific and timely and authentic to kids' sort of growing periods and mental processes, dealing with child psychologists, dealing with educational development theorists, all of those kinds of things, and came up with a new program. And let me give you a couple of examples in this. Grade 1, because everybody's like, oh my God, you're going to have sex ed in grade 1. My kid doesn't eat. Dial it down. That's not what I'm talking about. Grade 1, simple. You name body parts. That's it. That's it. You don't skip over areas. You don't say eyes, nose, mouth, shoulders, ruh-roh, stomach. What? Thighs, knees? Is that... There is no way that it makes any kind of sense to teach a child like that and to teach a child authentically like that, number one. Number two, you want to know what else this curriculum really focused on at a young age? Consent. Their bodies. Teaching a child that their body is completely autonomous of other people, that if anybody decides to breach that, they are allowed to say no, and they tell somebody right away. Nothing about it is a secret. Nothing about it should be kept private. Why would any parent not want that in the classroom? The only parents, and I'm saying this right out loud, and I would say it on a microphone to an entire room of people, the only parents that don't want to teach their young kids about consent terrify me. Flat out. Flat out. How would you not want to empower your child? How would you not want them to scream it from the rooftop? And we all know I would say, oh God, it's got to be easy. 85% of the sexual assault going on with our young kids is coming from inside the house. You want to change something that is breaking our kids from the foundation? Start there. How dare you take that out? Because what the Ford government did is they eradicated it. Why? Well, because they thought they talked about girls getting their periods too early. Well, guess what? Girls are getting their periods in grade 4. When do you want to talk about it, Steve? When they're 16? It is reflective of the time, of what is happening and what they need today. Kids are starting to be sexually active younger. And God, even when I was a kid, right? Grade 7, grade 8. Kids are sexually active. Pretend all you want, folks. Pretend all you want. Not my kid, not my kid. But I promise you, think about it really hard. Everybody who's my age, I'm 47, has a story and knows a girl in grade 7 or grade 8 who got pregnant. We all have that story. So how dare we wait till longer to talk about it? And what happened? The Ford government got into power and they had a whole bunch of parents say, I don't want you teaching my kid this. And they capitulated to that type of pressure. And they said, we are going to revert back to the 1998 curriculum. Do you have any idea what we've learned from 1998 to 2023? Do you have any idea of what we've left out, of what we're not talking about? Are you insane? And that's not to mention, obviously, this big, huge elephant in the room, which is the LGBTQ plus and gender identity that you guys just don't want to talk about at all because your 17% base has said, I don't want that in my schools. Well, you know what? Tough. If you don't want to talk about equality, diversity in your schools, I have nothing more to say to you. I really don't. Because it would be the same disgusting arguments that were made back in the age of civil rights when they say, oh, well, we think segregation is best. We don't want to talk about that in our schools. We don't want our kids sitting next to that kid. That religion we don't like. That skin color. Gross. And it is absolutely no different. And how dare you capitulate to it? How dare you? Now, if this is empowering parents to help their kids to learn, if you're talking about setting up extra help so that parents can understand the new math and they can help their kids, and you're going to give extra help to all of these different people, to first-generation immigrants who are struggling with the language, and you're going to offer all, dude, I'm with you. Let's empower parents. But that's not what you're talking about. That's not what you're talking about. You know it. I know it. This entire list is counterintuitive. Because you're making it seem as though we need to have these hard, strict lines. And if they pass, they pass. And if they don't, they don't. And it's the teacher's fault. Because if they don't pass, it's going to cost Ontario more money. And we all know you don't want that. So now what? By the way, the whole don't fail a kid is an economic strategy, not an intelligent one. And if we were being authentic and honest, different kids develop at different rates and maybe need more time in order to understand the foundations conceptually and intellectually of different subject areas. And if we were able to give them more time on that, rather than it only being a cut and dry, black and white, you're in grade 5 or you're in grade 6 and there's no in between, rather than offering a diversity of that, we what? We either shame them because they didn't get it right the first time or pretend that they got it and push them on so they can be forever weighed down by the lack of capacity because they never got that foundation and they're always trying to play catch up and you wonder why they're not being a success. I look at this list and I get frustrated. Obviously, you guys haven't noticed any frustration in my voice, have you? But I look at this stupid list and think, what ridiculous headers. Because I've sat here and taken a guess at a lot of things, right? But isn't that what the Ontario government's going to have us do? Take a guess at a lot of things? They're going to use key words like accountability and core foundational reading and blah, blah. That means nothing in real life. That has no general application. You're not talking about a lower teacher to student ratio. You're not talking about more EAs in the classroom in order to make sure that the kids with different learning abilities are getting extra help so they can actually keep up, not fake keeping up. You're not talking about actually building different ways to engage and test and evaluate students that aren't just based on a standardized test that you can fill in a Scantron card and doesn't have an easy process in order to get you a number at the end and stick it on your forehead and call it a day. Because education isn't that. You're trying to simplify it. You're trying to make it seem as though if it were just the good old days, we would do it like this. Guys, the good old days, let me be real clear before I end this. The good old days, kids dropped out at 14 years old. The good old days, kids didn't go to university or college, they just got a job. The good old days, any kid with a different learning ability, with autism, with dyslexia, with any kind of processing disorder, would be deemed unintelligent, incapable, and be tossed aside. The good old days were garbage. Absolute. How many geniuses do you think we lost along the way, folks? How many? How many? Because we didn't understand dyslexia. The good old days, if there was a kid that stepped out of line, he or she was out. Period. Your home life? They didn't care. Abuse? They didn't care. The good old days, there was abuse in the classroom. What the hell is the good old days? What a crock of crap. And while we're talking about the good old days, guess what? We're not there anymore. We're in an era where kids can access any piece of information at any given moment, anywhere, anytime, from the palm of their hand. And we think we can revert to the good old days when there were restricted movies and there was a curtain that separated the adult ones from the other movies, and that curtain, we don't have a curtain anymore. Kids have access. And if you don't build an education system that acknowledges the incredibly complex but amazing, powerful world we live in, you are dooming those kids to fall under the weight of it and never get educated through it. How dare you, sir? How dare you? I'm going to wait for this whole program to come out, and I'm going to pick it apart line by line. And we're going to see. And then I'm going to, unfortunately, watch it fail. And your 17% voting population is going to what? Cheer you because you save more money, because I guarantee your budget will come under. And to end off, I still invite you. I will go and be any single place you want me to be to talk about this issue. any place. I will roll the camera without interruption. I will not cut a single word. If you have foundational knowledge that can trounce what I'm saying, and you say, yeah, Joanna, but this, boom, 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 and you back it up and you are on fire and dude, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you got what it takes. I hope you have some sort of beautiful mind moment where you've decided how you're going to fix the entire educational system and cost us less. I hope for that. I hope I'm wrong. But if you're not, isn't it time that you were accountable, Steve? All right, guys, thank you for hanging out with me this week. I will see you next Tuesday. Same bat time, same bat station. Dismissed.